It was said that Ezinne's power lay in her ability to seize the manhood of any man who dared to cross her path. A curse born from a heart twisted by bitterness and resentment. Long ago, she had been scorned by a man whom she loved with all her heart, and in her despair, she had turned to dark and forbidden magics to exact her revenge. Once upon a time, in the heart of a remote village, where the dense foliage of the forest whispered secrets and the earth hummed with ancient magic, there lived a woman whose very name sends shivers down the spines of the villagers. Her name was Ezinne, a name that carried with it a sense of foreboding and dread, for she was said to possess a power so dark and mysterious that it struck fear into the hearts of all who crossed her path. Ezinne was a figure of mystery. Her presence clocked in shadows as she moved silently through the narrow streets of the village, her eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. Tales of her wickedness spread like wildfire among the villagers, whispered in hushed tones around the flickering flames of the evening fire. It was said that Ezinne's power lay in her ability to seize the manhood of any man who dared to cross her path, a curse born from a heart twisted by bitterness and resentment. Long ago, she had been scorned by a man whom she loves with all her heart, and in her despair, she had turned to dark and forbidden magics to exact her revenge. From that day forth, Ezinne had roamed the village like a vengeful spirit, preying upon unsuspecting men and leaving them emasculated and powerless in her wake. The men whispered tales of her wickedness, warning one another to steer clear of her gaze, lest they too fall victim to her curse. But try as they might to avoid her, the men of the village could not escape the allure of Ezinne's beauty, for she possessed a charm and magnetism that was impossible to resist. Many a man had been lured into her trap by the promise of passion and desire, only to find himself stripped of his manhood and left to wander the streets in shame. As years passed, Ezinne's legend grew, her name spoken of in hushed tones across the countryside. Some whispered that she was a witch, while others believed her to be a demon sent from the depth of hell to torment the souls of men. But amidst the fear and superstition that surrounded her, there were those who saw Ezinne not as a creature of darkness, but as a tragic figure, a woman consumed by her own pain and suffering, lashing out at the world in a desperate bid for revenge. And so, as Ezinne continued to roam the village streets, her eyes burning with an unholy fire, the men of the village whispered tales of her wickedness and prayed for deliverance from her curse. But deep down, they knew that as long as Ezinne walked among them, their fears would never truly be laid to rest. As the moon rose high in the night sky, casting an airy glow over the village, Ezinne's presence seemed to loom larger than ever. Villagers locked their doors tightly, huddling together in fears as they recounted the tales of men who had fallen victim to her curse. But despite the fear that gripped the village, there were some who dared to defy Ezinne's power. Among them was Namdi, a brave young man whose courage knew no bounds. Determined to unravel the mystery of Ezinne's curse, Nnamdi set out on a quest to confront the dreaded woman herself. Venturing deep into the heart of the forest, Nnamdi sought out the hidden lair where Ezinne was said to dwell. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding as he pressed forward, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. At last, Nnamdi came upon a clearing bathed in moonlight, where Ezinne stood alone, her eyes glittering with an otherworldly light. With a sense of trepidation, Nnamdi approached her, his voice steady as he addressed the woman who held the fate of the village in her hands. Ezinne, he said, his words echoing in the stillness of the night, I come to you not as an enemy, but as a friend. Tell me, what has driven you to wield such dark and terrible power? Ezinne regarded him with a mixture of surprise and suspicion, her gaze piercing through the darkness as she weighed his voice. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of something resembling hope stir within her heart, a glimmer of light in the midst of the darkness that had consumed her for so long. And so, as the night wore on and the stars danced overhead, Nnamdi and Ezinne spoke of the pain and suffering that had shaped their lives, forging a bond that transcended the barriers of fear and mistrust. In that moment, they realized that they were not so different after all, that they were both victims of a world that sought to crush their spirits and extinguish their hopes. As the first light of the dawn broke over the horizon, Nnamdi and Ezinne emerged from the forest, their hearts lighter than they had been in years, for they knew that together they would overcome any obstacle that stood in their way, united by a bond that defied the darkness and embraced the light. And so, as the villagers looked on in wonder, Nnamdi and Ezinne set about healing the wounds that had divided the community for so long, their love and compassion shining like a beacon of hope in a world filled with darkness and despair. And as they walked hand in hand into the future, they knew that no cause could ever hope to break the bond that they had forged, a bond that would endure for all eternity.